1, 2, 3, 4.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, everyone. This is Jewish Talk, coming to you live from Nassau Community College on 90.3 WHPC and also streaming on the iHeart and iTunes apps. You can join us in the studio by going to my Facebook Live page. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. So hi there. Yes, my name is Rabbi Pearl. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This all depends and when you are listening and, of course, watching. So before I get into the college scandal and the Purim and the power of women, I'd like to share the following. Dear friends, dear members of the Muslim community, in the wake of Friday's horrific massacre at the Al Noor and Linwood mosques in New Zealand, I have to reach out. Many people I know have said that in the aftermath of this horrific tragedy, that words fail them. I wish I knew what to say. One acquaintance told me exactly those words. I'd like to say, dear friends, on the contrary, there are words, plenty of them, and they have to be said. You see, the massacre in the mosques shows that we share a great deal. The gunman hated us both, Muslims, Jews, and anyone else who didn't fit in with his odious white supremacist views. So, my dear Muslim fellow human beings, I'm immeasurably sorry for your loss. This is a horrific tragedy. I condemn the hate that led to this massacre. I feel your pain. I stand with you. And of course, I have in mind all those who have passed away, and for the injured who are fighting for their lives. Please remember, you are not alone. Let us now, dear friends, address the college scandal. You know, the crime was breathtaking. Dozens of well-heeled parents paid millions of dollars to help their children cheat their way into the top American colleges, including Yale, Stanford, UCLA, and Georgetown. Parents paid middlemen to fake college test scores, bribe university athletic coaches, and fake students' athletics credentials. As I was coming today to the studio, I heard the word, there are many parents who are called helicopter parents. That means they're hovering constantly over the children, or they're even called snowplow parents, because they push away all kinds of problems in advance, making sure that children should have no problems as they proceed in life. And the question, of course, is that the healthiest way? The year-long scheme came crashing down when federal prosecutors charged 50 people with this bribery and corruption. And of course, sadly, there were among those charged were 33 parents. Some of them were prominent celebrities and business people, coaches, proctors, and officials at the college admission board. As we all know, here on Long Island, at this particular time of the year, so many families are knee-deep in college admission process. Sometimes they tell me days are spent discussing the merits of one college over another, and Sundays are taken up with all kinds of standardized tests. The reason I bring this up is because one of the troubling aspects of this recent bombshell is how unsurprising allegations of fraud and unfair advantage seems. Even before the U.S. Justice announced these charges in the college admission scam, so many people generally compare notes about the best ways to get into colleges. There are questions like, do some schools discriminate? How easy it is to get into an East Coast school when you apply from the Midwest? Does being a legacy, means if your parents are alumni of that school, does it help? Will students whose parents paid for a fancy summer program have an advantage over us? You see, what really bothers me is because it's heartbreaking to see students becoming cynical just when they're preparing to leave the high school and enter into the wider world. We at Chabad of Mineola pride ourselves. Each year in May, we honor Long Island teenagers called the Good Deed Awards for Long Island Teenagers, and over 1,000 young men and women who have now taken their place in society were recognized by the Chabad for their good deeds, because they are to know that people are behind them, encouraging them, and looking forward to their success. And here we have the exact opposite. My fear is that this corruption scandal will actually cement some students' views that society at large is an unethical place. Tragically, that worldview seems to be gaining currency. Are you aware that there's a 2018 Gallup poll that found that a majority of Americans harbor trust for only 3 institutions? They trust in the military, the small business, and the police. Other public institutions, including religious organizations, public schools, newspapers, and branches of government, saw dismally low levels of trust. We seem to be living through a crisis of trust. It breaks my heart to think that a whole generation of kids might be learning to mistrust some of the most central institutions in their lives, including school and college officials, coaches, and even parents. I was thinking back over Shabbos of the impact of the schools that I went through, both in London and in Paris, and then here in the United States, and the people I look up to, and the importance of knowing that those teachers made an impact on my life, that I could trust in them in giving me a life's advice. And I still live by the comments and the attitudes and the carefulness and the understanding that those school officials had for me. And I'm sure it would be the same for all of us listening. And how sad it is if you look back and you figure out, oh my goodness, look where they were. Look what they're doing. So one of the saddest aspects of the unfolding scandal is the fact that in some cases, parents dupe their children, as the term used today, helicopter parents or snow shovel parents who trying to push everything out and make it easy for their kids without too much effort on their own. We all want our children to feel that the world is a hopeful place and that their abilities will be enough to carry them through and allow them to blossom. But we're surrounded by so many examples of unfairness and inequality, it can be hard to raise children who trust in the world being really fair. And I reminded myself of the famous blessing that Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai, a great sage, great leader, gave his disciples 2,000 years ago. Something that I try to live every day. Some advice I would say that is very pertinent to our discussion. This great rabbi said to his students, try to aspire alive to have the fear of God and heaven as much as you fear flesh and blood. So one of the greatest gifts we can give our children is the sense of right and wrong and the courage and the inner conviction to live by those standards. Sorry for getting so excited, but it really bothers me. So good morning, everyone, again, to all those listening to us. You're on WHPC 90.3 FM. And, of course, we're on Facebook Live. And let me take a look at our Facebook dashboard. I'd like to say hello to Jonathan Wolf. Good morning to you. To Jean. Good morning, top of the morning to you. And to Dr. Kilshevsky, who also shared with us a very somber morning. An Israeli was murdered in a terror attack after Shabbos Zachor. And sadly, we're living in terrible, difficult times anywhere in the world. Good morning to Louis Pushkin. Bill Brickner, good morning to you, Bill. Hope all is well for you. And please, if you would like to share a comment or post it on our Facebook Live page, we'll be happy to share that with everybody here. And to everybody listening to us, thank you and good morning. Okay, I'm sure everybody's worrying about the Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel. I know that Kim is very big into that. And today we're really celebrating the stories of women who saved the world from dark times and bad guys. How interesting. While many critical moments in Jewish history revolve around great women, this week we have the opportunity to express this theme as we prepare ourselves for the great holiday of Purim and the reading of the book of Esther. The Purim story doesn't just have a strong female lead. I'm here to share with you today that it actually reframes the entire biblical perspective on the power of women. So bear with me, dear friends. We're all familiar with Haman's decree against the Jewish people and the salvation brought about through the heroic acts of Mordechai and Esther. In fact, please join us for the reading of the Megillah this coming Wednesday evening at 7:30 p.m. at our Chabad in Mineola, and once again on Thursday morning. It's a mitzvah to hear this story, the reading of the Megillah. It's a mitzvah to hear the Megillah twice, once at night and once by day. Why twice? Because the miracles of life are not just by daytime, when we can see them. We can also when we don't see them. There's two aspects to our life, and therefore it's important to hear the Megillah at night, 7:30 with us in Chabad Mineola, and again at 7 a.m. And Mineola, 7 a.m. on Thursday morning. So if you take a closer look, the very first decree in the story, when you read the Megillah, is not against the Jewish people. It's actually a decree against all women. Bear with me, my friends, and I want to say hello to the new comments that we're receiving right now on the Facebook. Hello from Greta, all the way from South Carolina. And Laura Baraban Berger, thank you. Good morning for joining us. Good morning to you and to Patty Fuchs. Please send our best wishes to your dear mother. And so we're talking about the power of Jewish women. And when you read the Megillah, even before we get into the terrible decree of Haman, we read about a decree against women. You're wondering, what am I talking about? In chapter 1, after Queen Vashti's refusal to appear before her husband, the king Ahasuerus, the king and his advisors are very concerned. What's the concern? For the queen's behavior will make all wives despise their husbands. As they reflect what happened, King Ahasuerus orders his wife, Queen Vashti, to be brought to appear, and she doesn't come. So this very day, the ladies of Persia and Media, who have heard of how the queen behaved, they'll say, look, they will turn around and do the very same thing to their husbands. There'll be no end to of scorn and provocation. So the Talmud explains that the advisor being quoted, who is so worried about all women not listening to their husbands, is none other than the evil Haman, who then goes on to suggest that in addition to the execution of the Queen Vashti, and I know that Mrs. Dorothy Rothstein played that position many times in Hebrew school, and she was really upset about giving that position. I'm with you there, Dorothy. What did this Haman say? There will be a judgment that all wives will treat their husbands with respect, high and low alike. Can you imagine? This was the decree. She didn't show up, Vashti. Forgot about it. She was executed. But there was a decree now that wives have to treat their husbands with respect. Now, this is an important part. This is part of the Megillah. The significance of Esther bringing about the salvation at the end of the story, because she is the one who ordered. She ordered her husband, right? There's a turnaround here. She ordered her powerful husband Ahasuerus to get rid of Haman. It isn't just a turn of event for the Jewish people. It is in a complete reversal of the original decree for women to be subservient to their husbands. But there's something actually more deeper being revealed here. See, the Talmud has a fascinating discussion searching for the connection between the story of Purim and the story of Adam and Eve. Can you imagine? The story of Adam and Eve happened thousands of years beforehand. Yet the Talmud in Chulin, page 139b, I know Mr. Jonathan Wolf likes to know the source of everything. There it discusses. Rabbi Matana asks, from where does the Torah find an allusion for the hanging of Haman? And he goes on to explain. He quotes a sentence all the way back when Adam and Eve ate from the tree of knowledge. What is the word? It says, Hamin ha'etz. Hamin ha'etz. Have you eaten from the tree? The word Hamin, have you, is spelt in the same manner as Haman. Haman has Hey Mem Nun, and when you say the word Hamin, have you, that also has the same letters, Hey Mem Nun. What's the significance? The Talmud is weaving together two stories to show us that the impurity and evil residue from the sin of eating from the tree somehow manifests itself in the personality of Haman. The connection between Haman and the tree is even further emphasized by the very fact that the tree brought spiritual concealment into the world. Right? After they ate from the tree, it was all kinds of problems. And that was the same force that is represented by the Haman's ancestry, the nation of Amalek, who also brought concealment into the world. But the connection between these stories becomes even more apparent when we continue to read that what was the punishment that was decreed on Eve from eating from the tree and to the snake. Let's first look at the punishment given to Eve. And we'll see immediately the connection with the Purim story. What happened? God says to the woman, because you ate from the tree, you're going to have a severe pain in childbearing. But number 2, yet your urge shall be for your husband, and he shall rule over you. Does that sound familiar? Can you imagine? These final words, the punishment against Eve was to subjugate women to men is chilling. Now, if we contrast this to the words that the Torah uses when Eve is first created, we see Torah's view a complete reversal of the role of a woman. Not the idea of being subservient to their husband. We see a complete reversal of that in the original plan. What was the original plan? The Torah says, God says, it's not good for you to be alone, man. I'm going to make for you an Ezer Kenegdai. That's the Hebrew word, which translates, Ezer means a supporter, Kenegdai, opposite you. The word used for a supporter is Ezer. It's a word used for an individual who's coming to the aid of a strongly person, right? Some guy is down and out. You have an Ezer. That's number 1, a description of a woman being a support of someone who's struggling. It refers to someone who is in the place of power, using their ability to assist someone who needs help. And the second word is kenegdai, which means opposite him, which means equal to him. Hello? Do you hear what I'm talking about, dear friends? Torah's view is men and women are absolutely equals. Ezer kenegdai. So when Eve, the curse, seems the whole punishment then was to lower the status of women, that has created a major problem for humanity. A heroic force is now being diminished to what seems to be a secondary status. This was precisely the intent of the snake when he went after Eve. He understood the greatness of evil's role in regards to her husband, and he knew if he could get Eve to fall, he'll be able to catch now Adam as well. So by getting Eve to eat from the tree and causing her role, which was to be an equal to her husband, to diminish that, the snake would have accomplished all that he set out to do. But my friends, the story isn't over. Like any good book or movie, the conflict that is set up in the earlier scenes comes to a conclusion, a resolution in the grand finale. I hope that, Doctor, are you listening carefully to this? What is the closing book of the prophets? It's the book of Esther. And indeed, the book of Esther begins with a decree, just like the beginning of the Torah talks about a decree against women with Eve. What's the first discussion in the book of Esther? A decree against women that parallels the decree against Eve, suggested by the snake. Who is the snake in the book of Esther? Haman himself, who is the physical embodiment of the original downfall. My friends, Esther contains the sparks of the soul of Eve and was aiming to rectify her original sin. It is against this backdrop that the heroine of the story, Esther, steps in. The great mystics reveal that the Esther contains sparks of the soul of Eve, and that her fasting and her bravery was all about to bring a rectification of that original sin of Eve. And by doing so, not only does she save the Jewish people, she also therefore is able to rise above Haman and evil that was introduced into the world in that original sin. This idea is truly brought home when we look at the punishment that was meted out against the real perpetrator of the original sin, which of course was the snake. What happened? What do we read about when we talk about the snake? We read at the end that he's going to go on his belly etc. And they'll strike at your head, and you shall strike at their heel. That's the words. And their offspring, they shall strike at your head. That was the Torah's wording on what will happen to the snake for doing these terrible things. Well, what is being referenced when we speak about the woman and her offspring striking at the snake's head? Very easy, my friends. This is the revelation, the climax of the book of Esther. When Esther decrees that Haman, who is connected to this primordial snake and the original sin, ended up being hung up by his head from a tree. Right? Eve eats from a tree, and good old Haman ends up hanging from the tree. Esther is now the supporter and the savior of the Jewish people, and at this moment, we see the power of the women being restored to the original holy status, which was this equality between men and women. See, much has been written, and much has been discussed, and much has been confused about the power of women in our times. And a lot of it has absolutely no relationship to how the Torah and Judaism looks at the great power and the importance of both men and women equally. We're living an incredible time in history when the world is celebrating the great accomplishments of women. It is truly fascinating when we see that the struggle and the emergence of strong, powerful women is actually woven into the fabric of Torah, highlighting both the very first story of humanity and the very final book of the prophets, where the emergence of a strong woman sets the story of humanity back on course. It's kind of a reality check. Resynchronization in the defeating of the evil of the world. Let's see how we're doing on our dashboard. And of course, thank you to everybody watching and listening to us. My friends, I want to say hello to Susan Kay. Thank you for joining us. Hello. And we appreciate everybody joining us on Facebook. And reminding everyone that this week is indeed Purim. Join us when we come to hear the Megillah and we come to the community and we celebrate together. We rejuvenate and re-energize ourselves with the same energies and the same power, the same blessings that happened. It becomes part of our life today. It's not just a history story that we're talking about. We're actually reliving. And certainly a reminder, and anyone who fits into the category of Haman, I would say beware. Let's wrap this up, so to speak. Again, appreciating Queen Esther. And I would say lessons in personal transformation that Esther brings to us. Just think about Esther. Let's think about it for a second. Imagine you're an orphan who's been raised by your uncle. That's what exactly Esther was. You're all alone in this world, always wondering where you really came from and if you really feel that you belong anywhere. Suddenly, as indeed with Esther, she's forced into a marriage to a man that you neither like nor respect. You're stuck in a forest, in a foreign palace, where you can only eat fruit and seeds because she tried to keep kosher there. There's no one for you to speak to and nothing for you to do except wonder how long you're going to remain living in this life that someone else has chosen for you. Because as you know, Esther was basically plucked off the street like all the other maidens and brought to the palace. But this was Queen Esther's life. She could have been filled with self-pity, thinking how unfair it was she was born into the world without parents, and how after all of her suffering she's now forced into a role that she so easily robbed her of her dignity and her faith. My friends, she could have given up. She could have sunk into a hole of her own despair. But instead, my friends, Queen Esther became a heroine. She kept her faith and her dignity. She refused to give up even when everybody else seemed lost. She took her tragic story and used it to transform her life. That's what we're doing when we come to hear the Megillah. And when we celebrate Purim with its mitzvahs of sharing food items, called Bishloach Manos. And we also, when we give Matanos Levyonim, we help poor people, and we sit down to a meal. All these are part of the transformation of our own life. And briefly, there are some lessons, personal lessons, that we can learn from Esther's life. The obstacle is the way. What do I mean? Esther took the suffering as she experienced as an orphan and used it to make her stronger. She knew that what it felt to be lonely. She knew that she had overcome the pain as a child and that she had the resilience within her to face those new challenges. When she stepped into the palace, guess what? She used those obstacles of her past as stepping stones instead of excuses. She chose to use her pain instead of being suffocated by it. But there's another lesson as well. Live for something greater than yourself. The more focused a person is on finding happiness for themselves in this world, here's the secret, my friends, the more that happiness will elude you. This is because we find the greatest happiness in giving to others and living for someone greater than our own desires. Esther could have decided to make herself comfortable in the luxuries of the pleasures of the palace and ignored the world and her people beyond the walls. But my friends, Esther didn't give up. She wasn't living for herself. She had grown up in the house of Mordecai. She knew that she had a responsibility to stand up for her people. Reach out to others for help. We often think that we need to forge our own paths without anyone's support. Esther was the queen. She could have decided to just on her own resources to try to save the Jewish people. But guess what? She chose instead to reach out to every single person in the Jewish nation. She asked them before she went present herself to the king and get the decree overturned. She asked them to pray for her and to fast for her. That's why this Wednesday is called Tanis Esther, the fast of Esther. She needed their prayers, as we need each and every one of us. My friends, please, perhaps I suggest, if you weren't planning to fast this Wednesday, to stand by Esther, to say, yes, you too, we too, all of us, appreciate what Esther did for us. She knew in her heart that ultimately we rise and we fall together. She had the humility to say, I need your help. Let's please fight beside her. Be with her. That's what we precede. The prelude to Purim is the fast of Esther, to remind ourselves of who she was and how each and every one of us can learn from her. And surely in the times that we live today, each and every one of us can make a difference. We can't just disappear into our own life. We are members. We are members of society, members of who we are, to make a difference. And of course, faith is persistence. When Esther risked her life and walked towards the king to beg for her nation, she felt the divine presence begin to leave her. She felt weak and afraid, like she couldn't go on. But the faith doesn't mean that we always feel strong and courageous. Faith means that we persist even when we are exhausted and afraid. So Esther did not give up when she felt that she couldn't go on. Instead of, what did she do? She prayed. She demanded to know, Hashem, why have you left me? I need you. She found the faith to reach out, to beg for strength, and to find a way to make the impossible possible. She kept moving forward until she reached the king. So my friends, a lot to think about. And I do appreciate everybody who is joining us every Sunday in the morning from 8:30 to 9. And later on we are heard again in the evening at 11 p.m. at night on Sunday for us to be able to share these ideas. And I do appreciate all those who are listening and all those who are watching us on Facebook Live, whether live or during the time of the course of the week, because all these makes a big difference in our life. So, dear friends, this is your host, Rabbi Pearl. Thank you so much for joining us. Be well, sei gesund, and have a wonderful, meaningful, uplifting, and wonderful Purim.